Hey guys, I've decided to come back.
Hey Adam, you're back. It's good to see you.
Oh, hey, Adam. Great to have you again. You're just in time for the RPG episode.
I quit.
What? Hello and welcome to the Retro Odyssey. My name is Steven, and I'm here as always with Matt. How's it going, Matt?
How you doing?
I'm all right. Been busy with work stuff, and you know how that goes.
Yeah. Yeah, it's definitely been a minute.
Yeah.
It's been a few months since the last one. Just scheduling issues have screwed us over. Ryan couldn't be with us this month, so it's just going to be us two today.
Yeah, and he's not off the show. He's just, super slammed right now. So, we're giving him a break, and we're just gonna put one out by ourselves. And it's not gonna be all about Square Enix. So what have you been playing in the month since we recorded?
Quite a bit, actually. I mean, it's been a few months. So I never got to talk about Resident Evil 8, which I absolutely loved. Honestly, it is my favorite Resident Evil game since the remake of 1.
Okay.
So it's my favorite one, like 20 odd years, because that came out in like 2002, I believe. The story is dumb because it's Resident Evil. The story is always kind of dumb, but it just took what worked in Resident Evil 7 and kind of like just amped it up and created this super weird horror, almost vignette kind of story with 4 different, very distinct enemies that you have to go and fight, each with kind of like their own different styles and areas.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just an absolute joy to play. Like I've gone through it, I believe, 5 times, which I never do for like most games. But I played through like my first playthrough on normal difficulty. Then I did a easy mode one just to mob up some achievements.
Mm-hmm.
Then I did a sub 3 hour easy mode one, which gets you kind of like another achievement. And I did a hard mode one, and I tried to do a Village of Shadows one, which is the highest difficulty, but I kind of like stalled near the end because there is a point in the game where I can't use the infinite magnum that I had unlocked in previous modes because you're playing as a different character for a little bit.
Right.
And the difficulty in that section is just too much that I can't actually do it.
Gotcha.
But it is so much fun. It has one of the most unsettling sequences that Resident Evil has ever had. Like straight out of a Silent Hill game, pretty much. It's just this giant crawling baby monster that like screams and cries, and just the sound it makes and the way it moves, it's just
unpleasant.
It is very, very unpleasant. I mean, after like going through that section like 5 times, it's just like, whatever. But like the first time, yeah, I was terrified by that.
Right. Well, I mean, it's good that you enjoyed it. I know it was pretty well received by basically everybody, I think.
Most of the complaints were down to how dumb the story was, really.
Yeah, but I mean, just from what I know as someone who has played exactly 2 Resident Evil games, isn't that kind of the point of Resident Evil?
Yeah, pretty much.
I mean, you're talking about the series where a lot of people's favorite game has you suplexing priests. Like,
Yeah. I guess after 7, which was kind of like more horror based, to this being kind of like more action based, I guess it kind of wasn't what people were expecting. But no, I thoroughly enjoyed it. It is probably one of the most batshit crazy stories since Code Veronica, which was absolutely off the wall. But I'm looking forward to seeing what DLC they bring out for that.
yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting to see.
I'm also planning on maybe doing a kind of speed run of it. Not like a professional type speed run, I'm not going to get probably anywhere near world first. I just want to see personally how fast I can do it.
Right, you're not going to submit a time. You're just going to see what you can do.
Yeah. But I need to wait for a patch from Capcom to fix some of the graphical issues that they had. Because there are a couple sequences where there's like so much particle effects going on, the game really, really slows down, and apparently that is down to the kind of DRM they used. And it is the DRM that's actually slowing the game down at those points, which is unfortunate.
I hate when they do that.
Mm.
And it's an issue that I very rarely come across because I don't do a lot of PC gaming, so my DRM is the block of plastic I use to play the game.
Yeah,
but it sucks so much because like in trying to stop piracy, they're hurting the people that actually bought the game.
Yeah,
it's terrible.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. Hopefully they will remove it, or I'm sure I can find somewhere online that will remove it.
Right.
Because it's just when the game's chugging like that, trying to actually record it just makes the problem a hell of a lot worse.
Yeah.
And if I am going to try and speedrun it, I want to record it.
Yeah, I mean, because even like you say, even if you don't get close to world record time, that's still something kind of cool to have.
Yeah. So that is something that I'm looking to do at some point. The only other new thing I've played is Final Fantasy III from the Pixel remasters, which I believe got announced after we recorded last time.
I think so.
And basically, it's just the first 6 Final Fantasy games that they've done like these remasters of, kind of giving them all kind of like similar kind of graphical style, and releasing them so far for whatever reason on PC and mobile. Hopefully we'll get a console release later on. I'm sure we will at some point. But 1 to 3 have been released so far. 4 to 6 are coming out later this year. Presumably later this year. But I decided to go into 3, and I've been really enjoying it. There are some quality of life features like auto battling, and I think some things have been tweaked to make things a little bit more streamlined and easy to use. I don't have a direct comparison because I've never played the original Final Fantasy III, but I am really enjoying it so far.
I was wondering about that because, like you, I've never played the original 3. My one complaint with these remasters is they basically just took the original versions of the games, be they NES or SNES, and redid the graphics a little bit, but that means that additional content from later releases is not present, and the bugs from the early releases may still be in there, which, I mean, for some of them is more of a problem than others. I know the first Final Fantasy was buggy as hell because it was held together by toothpicks and gum, but it's just that is a concern that I've had, but I don't know for sure if they did anything with that.
Well, as far as I can tell, they appear to have been remade from the ground up. I'm not sure how accurate that is, but certainly with the 10 minutes or so I played of the first game, the systems are a little bit different, and just it doesn't feel like the same engine. It just has all of these improvements. It probably would have been more work to add those improvements to the original engine than it would have been to remake it from the ground up.
Mm-hmm.
Especially since like all the textures have been redone as well, and the sprites and everything like that. But it is it's an improvement for me. I mean, despite missing that extra content that is in the other versions, which would have been nice to kind of like have a definitive version of these games with that in.
Yeah.
It is definitely something that is welcome, and to actually get a playable version of the 2D Final Fantasy 3 in the West, that's something we've been waiting for a very long time.
Right.
Because PSP, DS, they're both the 3D versions, and yeah, they haven't wanted to release the original 3 for whatever reason, and now they have.
Yeah, I still have no idea why that was. Like, it just doesn't make any sense to me.
It's got a really interesting job system as well, because it's essentially the same job system they have in 14.
Right.
Basically, any character can switch to any job at any point, and you have kind of like a character level, but you have like job levels as well, so you can level up in all these different jobs. Like switch your gear out and basically do an entirely different role, like at any time you want. And yeah, that was the game that kind of started in.
Yeah. It's definitely one that it's a shame that we never got, because it's probably one of the games that the job system is most integral to. I mean, I think 5 had some of it. I know 5 had the job system in, much more than 6 did. 6 technically had the job system in that every character could be classified as one of the jobs, but it wasn't labeled as the job system in the original release.
Yeah, and later games could kind of took like slightly different approaches that were almost similar. Kind of like 7, you could change roles kind of like by what material you had equipped. Although there were characters with specific base stats that you probably wanted in certain roles.
Right.
But yeah, in terms of 3, it's like Final Fantasy 14, the first Alliance Raid series in 14 is taken from 3, like the whole Crystal Tower World of Darkness thing. So I'm not sure why they were just reluctant to release it, but you know, I'm glad it's finally here.
Obviously, I haven't played 3, so I had no idea that Crystal Tower was from that.
I didn't either until I played it.
But yeah, it is cool to see. The 3 that they've released look better than they did originally, but I know 4, 5, and 6 had very good sprite work already, so it'll be interesting to see how they turn out.
Yeah, because they've essentially made these 3 NES games look like the SNES games.
Yes.
They've kind of like given them pseudo SNES graphics.
Right, because like the forests and the mountains in particular, I noticed looked like Final Fantasy VI.
Yeah, and obviously 4, 5, and 6 were SNES games, so it'll be interesting to kind of like see a comparison there.
Right.
But that's pretty much all the new stuff that I've played, to be honest. What have you been playing?
Well, I played an absolutely ridiculous amount of Final Fantasy 14 and got all the way through the Heavensward expansion and a good bit into Stormblood, and then had to stop because my sub ran out. But I'll be back on that. The other thing I've been playing mainly is Metroid, playing through the 2D Metroids since the new one, Dread, is coming out in October. So figure I might as well, go back and play through them again because they're not that long and get some of that muscle memory going.
Yeah, the trailer for that looks fantastic. The graphical style just looks amazing to me.
I'm really excited. I think it's going to be really good, and it'll be nice to like. I know I was, I think I've even said on the show that if we got a sequel, I wanted the pixel style instead of the style in Samus Returns. That's clearly where they want to go. So it'll be nice to be able to play that with an actual controller on the system it's intended for. And I'm just excited to have another 2D Metroid because it's been a while, and I absolutely love these games. I mean, I've played through them so many times just in the past year.
I wish I was good enough at games to get through.
The only one I really struggle with is Fusion. Because, and the original, but the original is difficult because it's so primitive and, held back by the limitations of the system. That's where the difficulty comes with the first one. But, with most of the others, I don't have too much trouble. It's just Fusion is really hard. I'm also not, I'm not super crazy about some of the stuff you have to do to get items. Like there's some items in Zero Mission and I think even in Super where you have to do like crazy Shine Spark stuff to get to them, and I'm not very good at that. I'm much better at the methodical, slow exploration, which is, why I come to these games, because I like the exploration element. I mean, I'm excited. It'll be fun. It'll be another Metroid game on Switch, which I'm still hoping that eventually we get the rest of them. It would be nice to be able to play everything on the same system, and if there's already most of it there.
Yeah, I mean, it's already got Metroid and Super Metroid, hasn't it?
Yeah.
On the online service.
And I mean, if they ever add Game Boy Advance online, Fusion and Zero Mission are two of the most successful Game Boy Advance games they had, I believe. They were two very successful games that weren't Pokemon, because they won't put Pokemon on anything.
Yeah, and we're still waiting for news on Metroid Prime remasters.
Yeah.
They've been rumors about for like the past 2-3 years now.
Yeah, I mean, we're confident it's coming. We just don't know when. I think that now what would make sense to me is if they wanted to wait and see how 4 did, and I don't want to say see if there's a demand, because they know there's a demand. I think they probably want to see how 4 sells, and actually Dread will probably factor into that too. If Dread sells really well, they might be more inclined to put more behind Metroid.
Yeah,
I know it'll be interesting to see. I've just discovered that I love this series, so I'm always going to be excited for a new game now.
I'll probably wait for reviews, just so I can see kind of like the difficulty, and if it's something that I think I can get through. Because if it's something that I'm going to find too hard, then there's no point me picking it up.
Right, because it's just going to frustrate you.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I've got that. Still technically working on different Final Fantasy games. The one I'm doing right now is 10, although I haven't done much with it since I've been playing 14. And then the one I just started, I actually started playing Okami on the Switch. Actually, Okami and The World Ends With You. Neither one for any particular reason. Just they're games that I've always wanted to play, and started them a couple of times and never finished. And Okami actually looks and plays really good on the Switch, better than it did on the Wii U or on the Wii. So I'm happy about that. But yeah, I mean, that's basically it. So I think if that's all we've got for that, we can briefly talk about some of the new stuff. I mean, we've already mentioned the Final Fantasy Pixel remasters and Metroid Dread.
Another major release that just came out recently was Skyward Sword HD, which I know Adam has played, but None of us have as of yet.
Yeah, I just haven't been able to get it.
Not really being a big Zelda fan myself, I've not really been too concerned about picking this up.
Mm-hmm.
But I know it was a fairly popular game, so I'm happy that people have like finally got a way to play this on current gen.
Yeah, I would say it's definitely an underrated game. There are legitimate concerns to be had with the original game. They did too much with the motion controls. Some of the areas were structured in weird ways. Like there are things you can complain about with the game, but it's not as bad as people said it was at the time, because it was, during that time where people were just raging against motion controls any chance they got. And Skyward Sword was definitely part of that. But I definitely think it's a game that is worth checking out, particularly for fans of Zelda. Now, for someone who's not especially big into Zelda, it might not be a priority. Were this 20 years ago, I would say it's worth renting.
Yeah, but I know they've added quality of life features to this, but Nintendo being Nintendo, one of those big quality of life features is hidden behind an admittedly beautiful amiibo figure, which no one can get their hands on. So I think it's kind of like a teleport feature or like a fast travel feature,
It's a fast travel.
and you can only use it if you have this amiibo.
It's been quite a while since I played it, but I think you had to be in certain places to go up or down to the clouds or to the ground, and the amiibo lets you do it from anywhere at any time. It's not a feature you need to get through the game, but it's super handy to have, and it's a bummer that they locked it behind an amiibo. I was hoping to be able to get one because I actually really liked the figure, but there was just no way I was going to get my hands on one of those.
It's gorgeous, honestly. I mean, I've never played the game, but I would have liked to have had that figure just to put on the shelf.
Yeah. It just, happens every time. It happened with Samus Returns. It happened with Twilight Princess. I think a lot of the Breath of the Wild amiibos were okay. I think the main ones that were hard to get a hold of were the champions. That was like a special one they did well after the game had released. But of course, the Breath of the Wild could use any Zelda amiibo from anything. But the features that were locked behind amiibo and that weren't that egregious. It was mostly costumes, if I remember correctly.
That's the best use for amiibos, really. Like costumes and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Like I remember Super Mario Odyssey, which I have the Peach wedding amiibo for. Now, using that allows you to get the wedding outfit, which you can get in game, but not until like quite late. You've got to like grind quite a lot of coins out to be able to get that particular outfit because it's quite expensive.
Right.
So that gives it you for free. But it did also have functionality in game as well, where if you use the amiibo, it refills your health, which it did help me out in some tough spots. But again, that's something that I wish wasn't hidden behind an amiibo.
Yeah, honestly, I think one of the better uses I saw was Mario Maker. There were certain ones that did special things, but a lot of the non-Mario ones just gave you costumes. So like you could put Ness in there and have a Ness costume in your Mario Maker course. And I thought that was kind of a cool way to use amiibos. That didn't make people who didn't have it feel left out as much.
Yeah.
And it was a way to use amiibo from different franchises than the one you're currently playing. Because it's still the number one thing Smash has over any other series with amiibos, is that pretty much any amiibo of those characters works. So like any Metroid amiibo, well, any Samus amiibo will work for Smash Brothers.
And do they give cosmetics?
In Smash Brothers, it's the little fighter characters. So it's a little AI that you can train up to fight.
So it's not something that you can use in like competitive mode then.
No, I mean you in Smash Ultimate you can set up a tournament with amiibos in there, but it like you can't go online and challenge people with amiibos. It is a feature locked behind the amiibo, but the amiibo is kind of the whole point. But it's also a completely optional feature of the game. Like, you do not have to engage with the amiibo functionality if you don't want to.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, I can't speak to how the new Skyward Sword plays, but I do remember it being better than people said at the time, in my opinion. But I do like the Joy-Cons they made for it. It's just I'm not willing to pay that much for yet another set of Joy-Cons.
Yeah.
But I think the other thing we had was Steam announced the Steam Deck. Basically, Steam trying hardware again, this time with a handheld that looks very much like a Switch.
Yeah, it's more expensive than Switch as well.
It is.
But you can play Steam Library on it, which is a major selling point.
Yeah. And a lot of people complain because they didn't have huge memory sizes. But when I'm looking at it, I'm like, okay, the stuff I want to play portable from my Steam library is not stuff like Doom. Or, well, I should say Doom 2016 or Doom Eternal. It's stuff like the Final Fantasy Pixel remasters. It's smaller stuff that's not going to require as much space.
Yeah. It's not like I'm going to put my 2,000 plus Steam library on this one handheld, so I've got access to everything at once. I'll just install what I want when I want it, and it's something that if it was half the price, I would have immediately snapped up.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm not paying that amount of price for a handheld.
Yeah, I did reserve a pre-order just because I'm a sucker for a niche piece of tech, and this does a very specific thing that I want. Because there's at least a few RPGs that have only ever been released on PC, and some like especially something like Final Fantasy that just works really well handheld. That works really well when you can take it with you. So for something like that, I would love to have my Steam library portable.
I mean, we were talking the other day about how Final Fantasy 13 isn't playable on current gen consoles. You could play the Steam version of Final Fantasy 13 in handheld.
Yeah,
that'd be awesome.
Yeah, and that's again, like I'm not looking to play Call of Duty,
no,
but it would be super neat to be able to take that downstairs and play Hades while I'm watching something, or do whatever. Like it's a very specific thing that it can do that I will make crazy amounts of that I'll get a lot of use out of, just like Steam's other hardware, the Steam Link and the Steam controller.
Yeah,
like very niche products, but they do exactly what I need.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, hopefully it will come down in price after the initial release.
Right.
And then it's something that I've got my eye on, but just not at that price point.
Yeah, and I mean that's totally fair. I think if that's all we have for that, I think we're ready to move on to our topic.
Yes. So we'll take a short break, and we will be back for that.
Remember the Emperor!
For this episode, we decided to do RPGs, and in the interest of not letting it become a Square Enix fest, we decided to do Western RPGs. Because let's be honest, if we allowed JRPGs, we would just be talking about Square Enix the whole time.
Yeah, especially without Ryan here.
Exactly. So we've just decided to cover Western RPGs. We've got 2 of them, although, I mean, there's others that can be discussed from those 2. But the first of them is Ultima 4 Quest of the Avatar, I think?
Quest of the Avatar.
Ah, okay. When did this one come out? Because this was... You said you had this on Master System?
Yes, yeah. I got it on Master System originally. I believe at some point I did have the PC version as well. But this came out in 1985.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So... was that just before Final Fantasy? Final Fantasy was 87, I believe.
1987.
Yeah.
For Final Fantasy.
Obviously, as you can tell by the title, it was the 4th game in the long-running Ultima franchise. And the Ultima franchise went on for like several years after this as well. There are quite a lot of Ultima games, originally made by this guy called Richard Garriott, who is quite famous in the in the Western RPG scene, at least in the early days of it. And this game is a bit different than your average RPG in that the big bads of the world are dead. They were vanquished in earlier games. Like Ultima 1, 2, 3, those big bads are dead and gone. But what Ultima 4 is dealing with is the aftermath of that. And the state of the world, how the world kind of like essentially rebuilds itself. And your main quest in the game is to increase your virtues, stuff like patience, loyalty, honor, compassion, etc., stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And you need to kind of like, in order to complete the game, you've got to like max out all of these virtues. And it's a strange kind of game, honestly. You basically start off being transported to like a medieval fair, and you meet this traveler who tells you your fortune and asks you certain questions, and they will determine your starting stats in all of these virtues, and it will also determine your starting city as well, because there are several cities that you can start in the game. And you can pretty much go about getting these virtues in any way you want. By doing good deeds, by doing certain deeds, you can increase certain virtues, and that might decrease other virtues. And you've got to kind of like have this... It's like a balancing act. You've got to be spinning multiple plates and like keeping an eye on all these different values so you can try and max them all out. The original PC release is like quite primitive in terms of movement. I mean, you have to move kind of like northeast, southwest, and you've got to type commands like talk and search and stuff like that, which in the modern day it's quite difficult to go back to, and it can be quite tedious at times on the PC version. But it was originally the Master System version that I played, which has regular movement on the D-pad, and you have like a menu system that you access with the buttons to do all your commands. And I found the Master System version a lot more playable than the PC version, because I did originally start playing this again on the PC version when we started playing it for this episode. And I went into it and I was thinking, I don't remember it being this difficult to kind of like get around and stuff like that, because I knew that at some point I had the PC version, because it comes with like these big books, like these big physical books in the original PC version, like the Encyclopedia of Britannica or whatever it was called, like a history of the world that the game takes place in. And I know that the Master System version didn't come with those books, but I remember having those books, but I remember playing the Master System version. So I must have had the PC version at some point. But when I actually went on my emulator and booted up the Master System version, I finally saw, yes, this is the version that I did actually play, like as a kid. And there's a lot of nostalgia there, honestly. A lot of it is down to the music, which is quite basic, but it just has this feel, and it stirs up a lot of memories for me. Going back and playing this with a Master System version with like the easier controls and stuff like that, I was having a lot of fun with it. I didn't get particularly far in, probably about an hour or so. And this is kind of a game which doesn't really hold your hand. There's a lot of stuff that you've got to kind of like work out yourself. And obviously, without a guide or anything like going through this time, I wasn't able to get particularly far. But I was able to get far enough to kind of like get an impression of it and remember the kind of stuff that I liked and didn't like about playing it originally. And this is something that at some point I must have sold my original copy because I did have it on my system, but I no longer have it. This is definitely something that I would pick up again on Master System if I saw it. What were your impressions of it?
Well, I played the PC version, so I struggled a bit with it. I mean, it was just one of those things where, you know, when you're playing an old PC game, you gotta kind of figure out what they were doing, because a lot of times those older games were before things were standardized. So it took me a little bit of time to kind of get my bearings and figure out, you know, how to maneuver around and how to do the different things. And once I kind of got a feel for it, it was, you know, it wasn't a bad experience. I mean, it's not a game I'll be clamoring to go back to, but there definitely is something there. It's just, you know, coming back to it all these years later is rough.
Yeah, definitely.
But I mean, I'm also a sucker for RPGs in general, so I'm usually willing to put up with a lot for a good RPG.
You can kind of see in this game the differences between Western and Japanese RPG development as well. Mm-hmm. With Japan mainly being a console market and the West initially being more geared towards PC, there is a certain ease of use that a lot of Japanese RPGs have. On PC, there was almost pride in being obtuse sometimes. A lot of these older games are just needlessly complicated, and they pride themselves on that. I certainly wouldn't say that Ultima 4 is kind of like the biggest example of that. There is certainly more obtuse RPG games coming from Western developers around this time.
Yeah, you go to LucasArts for that.
Yeah. But this is one that certainly isn't user-friendly, I would say. Mm. At least on the PC version. They did make those concessions for the Master System version to an extent.
Right, because you have to make it playable on the system.
Yeah. Like I said, this game was like a big chunk of my childhood. Mm. So there is definitely something there for me. But would I recommend playing it now? Unless you have that nostalgia, I would say no. There is stuff there if you really, really want to get into some Western RPGs, but there are better examples, I think. Mm. Despite this being one of the most popular games of the Ultima series, mainly because it did get that Master System release.
Right. And I think that's a good point, that Japan tended more towards consoles and you know, the West tended more towards PC, which I think is part of why I've always leaned more towards JRPGs than Western RPGs, because I've always been more of a console player than a PC player. And Square was on everything.
Yeah, Japan didn't have the kind of like homebrew computer scene that Europe and the US had with like the Spectrum and the Commodore. So you had that kind of like computer base in those countries, which Japan kind of didn't really have. Mm-hmm. So that really informed their development of games going forward. There's not really a huge amount that you can say about this game, really. I mean, despite having sunk hours and hours into it as a kid, again, like I said, without the guide, I couldn't get like super far into this. So I can't really give any concrete information about like mid game, late game stuff like that. I don't think I ever completed it as a kid, but I did get like quite far in. And it's a shame that I don't have my original cartridge anymore. But it's difficult to summarize a game that you enjoy mainly for nostalgia reasons.
Mm-hmm.
Because I can't point to any one mechanic and say, this is why I like this is why I like this. It creates feelings in my brain that just make me feel like a kid, I guess.
That's totally valid. I mean, a lot of people have that. I mean, that's, kind of how I feel when I watch Power Rangers and Sentai. Like, it's that, I mean, first of all, because they're designed for children, but also like, it's just that getting that same feeling, remembering what it was like when I first saw it. So yeah, I definitely understand that feeling. Even when the thing that you remember so fondly and feel so good about is objectively not as good as some other things. It feels a lot like the RPGs of the time did. I mean, I don't want to say it's just another one, but it is very, very similar. It's in a very similar vein. Maybe not as insane as some of the LucasArts stuff. It's probably got at least a little more grounding in logic. But it is very representative of what that genre was at that time, which I think is, it's not even really a criticism. That's just a statement of fact.
Yeah.
It's not terrible. It's a game that if I had played the Master System version, I probably would have gotten further in. If I ever go back and try it again, it will probably be the Master System version.
Yeah, and that's something that I'm going to look into trying to get again as well, because I must have sold it at some point. It must have been going for like stupid amounts of money at some point, so I kind of like offloaded it.
Right.
Not that I remember doing it.
Oh, there was an NES version. Okay.
Number 4 did get released on a hell of a lot of stuff.
Oh man, you can get the 5-inch floppy for $141. So a boxed copy is on eBay for $178.
Wow. I'm assuming that's a PC version.
Oh no, that's a Master System.
Jesus.
Master System missing cover sleeve, $73. Box without instructions, $131. So yeah, this is not going to be easy to obtain through traditional channels. Although I mean, does that company even exist anymore?
The franchise is owned by EA now.
Oh well, okay. So there is somebody that would be upset if you were to acquire it through other means.
I'm not really fussed about upsetting EA, to be honest.
Oh, I'm not either.
But I mean, the thing is about getting a box copy as well. It comes with a map, and I like having the booklets and instructions and stuff like that. And it is something that I set up like an eBay search alert for.
So yeah, it's not the easiest game to acquire.
No, but you can get the PC version like actually for free. GOG has all of the Ultimate games, and Ultima 4 is actually free. I think I got like the entire Ultima series in a sale once for about $7.99 on GOG. One thing about the PC version, you do have to mod it if you want music in it.
Oh, that's right. I forgot about that.
Because the original PC release didn't have music, but there are ways to update that and update the graphics as well. Yeah, I played it with a few mods on.
GOG is really good for some of the older stuff like that, and especially because they do the legwork to make it play. Like, you buy the original Fallout on Steam, it's not going to work unless you know how to mess with the files. It's certainly interesting, especially as a time capsule, and it is relatively easy to obtain a digital copy. You just have to do some legwork, and then if you're just, if you're rolling in cash, then you can get a Master System copy. Of course, if you're that rolling in cash, you can get it on floppies if you still have a PC that'll play them.
Yeah.
I've never owned a computer that had a 5-inch floppy drive. By the time I came around, we were already on the 3.5s.
Yeah, my school had the 5-inch ones, but I only own like the 3-inch.
But yeah, so I think it's about all we've got for that one. So we'll take a brief musical break and go on to our next game.
Okay.
You dare oppose the might of the Imperial Legion?
So for our second game, we went for a much more mainstream pick, at least nowadays. We're talking about the Elder Scrolls IV Oblivion. Why Oblivion and not Skyrim? Well, because some of us liked Oblivion better than Skyrim.
I've been trying to get us to cover Oblivion for a very long time.
And also Oblivion fits better into our time frame. So I think Skyrim
came out in 2011.
Yeah.
And obviously it's been re-released so many times.
Yeah, so Skyrim's a little too close for us to talk about. But Oblivion has Patrick Stewart in it, so, that's already points in its favor.
And Sean Bean.
Oh, that's right. I forgot about that.
So for me, this is something that I have spent years and years of my life playing. I got an Xbox 360 not long after they came out, and I got a subscription to the magazine as well, and I didn't know what games I wanted, essentially. And at that point, Oblivion was the only 10 out of 10 game that they had. Like, they listed like all the best games of the console, and Oblivion was the only 10 out of 10. So I thought, okay, I've not played RPGs for a while, because I'd kind of like moved on at that point. But I thought, this looks like something that I could get into, so I picked it up. And I absolutely fell in love with it. I played for years until my 360 crapped out, and unfortunately I lost everything. But I then migrated onto the PC version, and I've been playing it ever since. I think I can't think of a time when this hasn't been installed on my PC. It is something that I always have on there that I can just dip into in and out anytime I want. And funnily enough, despite having played this game since 2006, still not finished it.
Really?
I've never finished Oblivion because it's one of those games where there's so much you can do. You have so much freedom to do like whatever you want. I just get distracted every single time I go on and think, oh, I'm just going to go through like the main story quest and do all of that. I'll just see a random cave and I'll just start delving into that, and there'll be a story around the cave, and I'll do that. And then I'll think, oh, I've nearly got enough money for a house. So I'll go to one of the cities and try and buy a house, do all the quests in the city. And it just turns into a whole thing. And I've never finished the game, despite it being in my top 5 games of all time.
Interesting. I assume you've played through the DLC content in at least some capacity.
Yeah, I have completed the Shivering Isles, which is like one of the main DLC expansions for it. The other one being Knights of the Nine. I have played through and completed both of those, and those are excellent. I mean, Shivering Isles set a standard for what an expansion should be.
Yeah, that's a name that I had heard that referenced as really good DLC years ago.
But unfortunately, this game also set a standard for really pointless DLC, and people still reference the Oblivion horse armor to this day as the beginning of absolutely pointless microtransaction DLC.
Right.
It is literally what it says. It is armor for your horse that you can buy with real money, and it is essentially pointless. It's just a cosmetic thing. I mean, it does give a slight bit more HP to your horse, but generally speaking, your horse isn't going to get attacked that much anyway.
Right.
It is just to make it look shinier, and it's weird that the game has some of the best and the worst DLC, like all in the same game.
Yeah, because I mean, like something like the horse armor would be fine if it was just a thing you could unlock, but to actually have to buy it, that's
It's like such a small thing, and I don't think it was majorly expensive. I think it was like $1.99 or something like that.
Mhm.
But it is kind of like what that DLC represents and what it led to.
Yeah, it opened the door.
Yeah, because all the rest of the DLC for the game, it's well, maybe aside from spell tomes, which just added like a few more spell books to the game, which again wasn't amazing, but the rest of the DLC, you've got the two expansions, you've got quite significant player housing DLC that tend to have like quests attached and stuff like that, which generally are a little bit out of place in the world. Like they are these big, ostentatious buildings that you just happen to have inherited, and you can like go and live there, make that your house. They don't quite fit, but it is still a substantial piece of DLC for your money.
Right.
Whereas the horse armor is just paying for nothing, basically.
Right.
But that's the DLC. Let's talk about the actual base game, because that's what we're here to talk about. This kind of blew my mind when I played it, which is why it's kind of like stuck with me for so long. We mentioned briefly Skyrim. Now, I was really looking forward to Skyrim when that came out, because I thought, oh, it's going to be like Oblivion but better. And a lot of people do think that. I'm not trying to knock Skyrim. The game is fine, it's enjoyable, but it just didn't have the magic that Oblivion had for me. It just didn't have the charm. Skyrim is Oblivion with the charm removed, if you ask me. There's a certain quirkiness and certain otherworldly element to Oblivion that Skyrim just foregoes for kind of like gritty realism. And that charm is kind of what keeps bringing me back. And the fact that the game, honestly, even without mods, still looks beautiful to this day. There is a certain point early on in the game where you're essentially playing a tutorial mission. You start in a jail cell and you go through a sewer system and end up in these ruins, and you have this whole thing with the Emperor, and it's just a tutorial and setting up your class, and it's quite dark and murky and atmospheric. Then you leave the sewer, and immediately this world just opens up, absolutely full of color, with kind of like a ruin across the river that you can immediately go to. You can go and follow the main quest if you want. Just this scene just opens up, and it just kind of like fills you with wonder. Like deliberately, they kept those sewers, I think, dark and quite drab at the start of the game, so that when you did get into that open world, with all the color and the vibrancy of that, it just sets off something in your brain. It's just a really, really impressive kind of like introduction to the world, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And you do have absolute freedom of movement. Most people starting the game and probably going to leave that sewer and then immediately go over to the ruin across the river. There is no quest or main story plot line really around it, but it's just a massive ruin that you can just go in and explore and kill monsters, and there's treasure, there's traps. It is actually one of the more extensive ruins in the game, and I think intentionally they put that right in front of you, so you kind of had an immediate feel for the kind of content that the game was trying to lead you towards.
Right.
And they wanted to impress you by having like one of the most expansive dungeons like immediately straight away that you could just completely skip and never see if you just walked the other way and followed your quest marker.
Which I think is exactly what I did.
A lot of people will. A lot of people will just like follow the quest marker, not worry about stuff like that. But for me, a lot of the best parts of the game are stuff that you just stumble across.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a vast amount of quests in the cities, some really, really interesting and deep kind of stuff. But you have the freedom to just essentially live your own life in this world. You can go and complete dungeons, you can go and farm gold, you can craft stuff and sell stuff if you want. If that's what you want to do.
Right. And for what I understand, that's always been one of the big draws about Elder Scrolls is that freedom to just go do whatever.
Yeah. Morrowind kind of set the standard for that. I don't think there was much of that in the first two Elder Scrolls games. Because obviously this is the fourth.
Right.
Morrowind was the third, and again, like Oblivion, it's a massive open world exploration thing where you can do what you want. I personally could never get into Morrowind. It kind of felt a little bit too primitive for me in terms of the systems. With Oblivion being like kind of one of the flagship titles for 360, they did add a lot of ease of use stuff. Like when we mentioned with Ultima 4, like the Master System version of that added a lot of like concessions to console gamers, and Oblivion kind of did the same thing, much to the chagrin of fans of Morrowind, who absolutely hated a lot of the changes, a lot of the ease of use stuff that was added to make it properly playable on console.
Which is interesting because Morrowind came out on the original Xbox.
It did. But I think they kind of like primarily developed this with consoles in mind, whereas with Morrowind, it was primarily designed with PC in mind.
Right.
So you do have a lot of those console concessions that made it to the PC version, which honestly, I really like those ease of use things that they added. And going back and playing Morrowind without a lot of that stuff, it feels quite awkward to me. But Oblivion just has that perfect balance of it that just keeps me coming back.
Yeah, nice. And like, I didn't get terribly far in the game, although I could have gotten significantly further with the extra time we had. But like, just the part that I played, I could already tell this was this was something special. Because I mean, you know, full disclosure for the audience, I had never played an Elder Scrolls game before this. I had never played really any Bethesda game aside from the more recent Doom games. So I went in, this was my first experience with this kind of game. And I mean, like, I had heard about it. My brother had Oblivion years and years ago, probably back close to when it originally came out. And, you know, like, he was telling me about how great it was, and he had such a blast playing it. I just never got around to it. But I really enjoyed it. And I liked, you know, you talked about the freedom in what you could do. One of the things I liked the most is the freedom in what you could be, where, you know, you could set yourself up to be anything you wanted. I mean, you have the wide range of races to pick from, with a, you know, pretty significant amount of customization, and then you can set your classes up to, you know, I mean, it's not a perfect system, but it's a pretty good system for making a unique character.
Absolutely. And even if you kind of like go into the game as a certain class, the game doesn't really essentially have classes as such. You just kind of like have base stats which translate into certain specializations, should we say.
Right.
But if you want to completely change what you're doing, you can just like equip a bow and arrow or something and get up your skill in that, and you can like become an archer if you started as kind of like a mage early on.
And honestly, what it reminded me of, which, another game that I hadn't played until more recently, was Final Fantasy II, where the actions you took would improve your stats for that thing. So the more you use a bow, the better you get with a bow. The more you use swords, the better you get with swords. That system is basically the same thing that Final Fantasy II does, with the exception that Final Fantasy II, because of how it was made and how it was coded, it basically got to the point where you could do things like hit yourself to make yourself better. Like, you could do some really crazy stuff in Final Fantasy II. But I really liked this system. So, like, I was able to go in and say, okay, I have this character concept I want to do. I did look up to see if anyone had suggestions for it. But it's one of those things where it's like, okay, I want to use this weapon, and I want to focus on these spells, and you could just pick and choose, and I really like that.
One of the things we do have to bring up, though, is the leveling system is actually quite broken in the original game, because enemies scale to your level, and if you increase your skill in anything, say athletics just by running and jumping around, healing if you're using healing, stuff like that, if you increase minor skills, they will contribute to your character level. I believe it's every 5 skills you increase, you'll get a level. And if it's only like minor stuff, like athletics, etc., stuff like that, you're going to end up, when you get to late game, being significantly underpowered for the monsters. Because if you don't increase your base stats, like your strength and your health and stuff like that, which usually the more you use a skill, it'll give you a bonus of 5 points to increase when you actually level up. Whereas skills that you haven't used as much will give you 3 points. You basically need to make sure that your major skills for the character that you're playing have those +5 increases. Otherwise, it will like lead to a massive power loss as you get to the much higher levels, which on PC you can mod out.
Right.
Which is something I always tend to do. But on console, you are stuck with it. So you do generally have to be quite careful in how you level your character.
Mm-hmm.
There are, of course, ways around it. And I played the 360 version for years without too much issue. But it is something that, if you are looking to play this game, look into some articles about leveling pitfalls first.
Right.
Because there are some very easy pitfalls to fall into, which can just lead to you not being able to compete at like later levels.
Right.
The leveling system aside, I think the atmosphere of the game is fantastic as well. Just like going around the countryside, like the we won't really talk about the composer of the music because he's a really shitty person, but the music itself just fits the environment so well, and just everything combines together to it's just like a magical atmosphere that just always puts me in this like really calm place while going through the wilderness. It just complements the game really well.
The music is definitely good. I don't remember hearing about the composer, but I wouldn't be surprised, because there's a whole lot of bad people in this industry, as we've seen lately. I think it did a good job setting up the tone early, because the very first thing that happens is you're in jail, and then the Emperor comes to your cell and is like, "Hey, you," and it's On the one hand, it's like, oh, these are, big, grand events. And on the other hand, it's like, this is a little bit silly.
Once you get out in the world, I mean, it's worth mentioning the cities as well. There are quite a few cities, and they all have different atmospheres, different feels to them. And some of the best content in the game is actually in the cities. Like some of the quests, there's one particular quest in Coral, which involves a guy who believes that he's being stalked by several people, and he asks you to kind of like keep an eye on them. And turns out he's just like incredibly paranoid, but he's like wanting to kill these people that he's convinced are following him. And you follow these people, and they just go to work and just do nothing whatsoever against this guy. He is absolutely completely delusional. But it's a really involved quest line, and it is like one of the standout ones for me. And that's just one quest line in one city, and there are dozens of quests in each city, and you've just got to go around and just talk to people, and you'll eventually just pick up all of these really, really interesting quests. And some of them require you to break the law and get yourself thrown in jail, which is something that you can get thrown in jail for a shitload of stuff anyway. So there are whole mechanics around going to jail and stuff like that. Basically, everything gets taken off you when you go into jail, but they give you one lockpick that like the gods don't find. So you can either like serve out your time, pay your fine, or you can escape if you want. There are kind of like a lot of different options to do that, and all of these systems just tie into each other really, really well. You can go around and be a good person and not end up in jail, or you can go and
join the Dark Brotherhood.
Yeah, join the Dark Brotherhood, join the Thieves Guild, and if you end up in jail, you can always try and escape. And there's so much freedom, and the systems are in place to give you that freedom.
Now, one thing I wanted to ask about, because I wasn't gonna see this quest anyway, because I wasn't gonna do the Dark Brotherhood stuff, but I remember my brother doing a quest that was basically it was like a mansion full of people, and it was supposed to be like a whodunit, but the answer was you, where you just had to kill everybody in the house. Is that in Oblivion or is that Skyrim?
I have never done the Dark Brotherhood quest line.
Okay.
So I can't tell you. I find it impossible in Oblivion and dozens of other games as well to actually be an evil character.
Right.
I can't do it. And to get into the Dark Brotherhood, you need to have killed someone. You need to have killed like an innocent person. So unless I've done it by accident at some point, I never even get the invitation to the Dark Brotherhood.
Yeah. Oh, that's fair. I mean, I'm the same way. Playing Knights of the Old Republic, there are certain things I will not do. Even if I'm trying to do a dark side run, there are certain things I will not do. So yeah, I definitely understand that.
It's like I'm always polite to everyone as well. I just can't be rude to someone in a video game.
Right. I actually one of the few issues I ended up having was having to aim at someone to talk to them. I was trying to talk to Innkeeper, I think, or maybe it was just the barkeep. But instead of talking to him, I ended up stealing something. I'm like, no.
Yeah, and they're immediately like, stop, thief.
Yeah.
And yeah, it is easy to get yourself into trouble because one thing that will also get you into trouble is attacking a friendly NPC. And the thing is with the combat, it's not particularly a refined combat system. You just like click to swing your sword or whatever weapon you've got.
Right.
And if you are fighting around other NPCs, they will often just walk in front of you. while you're actually swinging your sword.
And then they're
And then-
attacking you.
Yeah, in the middle of battle, you will have like if you're fighting alongside like Imperial guards, the Imperial guard will just forget about the guy that he was attacking and try to arrest you in the middle of battle for attacking him. It's not a game without its jank. It is a janky game in places, but that to me just kind of like adds to its charm.
Well, and to bring the topic back around, that plays right into the history and the legacy of Western RPGs. There are Western RPGs from back in the day that are nothing but jank.
Yeah, but Oblivion just has this certain kind of jank that just adds to everything, I think.
Right. There's nothing that's unbearable about it. It's just like, oh man, like, the merchants running out of gold. Like I remember seeing people talk about anytime you play Skyrim or Oblivion, you got to mod it so that the merchants have more gold.
It depends what merchants you use. I never tend to have a problem. I use a certain merchant. There is a certain merchant in the Imperial City that offers better prices than anyone else, will give you more money for goods. And there's a whole quest line around him because he's kind of like taking stuff that's essentially been grave robbed, which he doesn't realize, but that's what's happening. Like his supplier is kind of like robbing graves. And as long as you don't do that quest line, he will always have better prices and give you more money for stuff. And he does have a lot of gold on him as well.
Yeah.
So I always use that one merchant and no one else.
It's interesting.
Because once you do his quest line, his prices go up. And they become more in line with everyone else.
Mm-hmm.
One last thing I want to touch on is probably my least favorite thing about the game, and it's in the title, the Realm of Oblivion.
Mm-hmm.
So you have the story of the game is that after the Emperor has been killed, these Oblivion gates start opening up because the Emperor being alive, like he's tied to these dragon fires, which kind of like protect the realm, and once he dies, the fires go out, and it allows like these Oblivion gates to start opening. And I really don't like the Oblivion gates. I find them needlessly maze-like. There's a lot of enemies that are really quite tough in there, and it's just kind of like a chore to get through the Oblivion gates.
Mm-hmm.
It is the one thing I really don't like about the game. The first one you have to do for the story. I believe there are a few more later on that you need to do. You need to do like a certain number, but I always make sure to do as few as humanly possible.
Right. I think I did see that.
If you got to Cloud Temple, then you would have had to have done the one in Kvatch.
Right. Yeah. Where you had to save the town because the guards were just standing outside of it yelling with a megaphone.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I did that one. And that was... I mean, it wasn't horrible, but it definitely wasn't my favorite part of what I played. And like you said, there definitely were some tough enemies in there.
But on the other side, you do get a sigil stone for completing them. And the sigil stones are used to enchant quite powerful enchantments on gear. And there's some really, really decent ones. It's randomized, so basically just save your game before you touch the sigil stone and keep reloading until you get like a really decent one. But it's such a chore to get to the sigil stone. So I usually don't end up bothering.
Yeah, I mean that's fair. And it's another one of those things where it's like, you go into these types of games for specific things, and if something doesn't gel with what you want to do in the game, you just kind of do what you have to and get out.
Yeah, yeah. It's just. I think from a design standpoint, it just doesn't have it's lacking that charm that the rest of the game has.
Mm. Which, I mean, in theory, that could be a well done intentional choice to be like, okay, this part of the game, this place is different. This part of the game is supposed to, make you uneasy, et cetera, et cetera. But it also has to be fun to play.
Yeah. What is fun to play though? I'll just go to this briefly. If you do ever play Oblivion, just make sure that you do the Shivering Isles expansion
Mhm.
because it is an absolute joy. You end up working for one of the Daedric princes, this guy called Sheogorath, and he's just this Scottish madman, and he's really funny and off the wall, as well as being completely psychotic. There's a reason it's so well remembered.
Mm.
It is a fantastic piece of content. And you can do it straight away as well. You can do it at level 1 if you want.
Yeah, okay. I'll definitely check that out because I definitely do plan to go back to this game, and I'll probably even still keep the same character because I actually liked what I made. One of the few times that I actually went in and did some of the character customization, because a lot of times I'll find a pre-gen that's kind of close to what I want and then do minor tweaks from there. But Oblivion's didn't have some of the more in-depth stuff like, adjusting every line of the face. So I tinkered with it a little bit and got a pretty nice character out of it.
It's almost impossible to create a good looking character in Oblivion.
Well, I mean,
The faces are terrible. With a lot of work, you could manage something passable.
well, that's why I made a lizard.
Mm.
Because it's like, oh, if they're all gonna look wonky anyway, let's make a lizard where at least it's it's not as jarring.
So, what class did you actually play as?
So I don't remember the name for it. I don't remember if it was like a battle mage or a spell sword because I think there's both of those in there. But basically, what I went for was magic and swords, and I was building a red mage.
Yeah, it's essentially one of the best kind of like archetypes that you can play in the game because magic can get really really powerful.
Mm.
But I always tend to go with sword and shield, but I do supplement it with a bit of magic. But my very first character on the 360 was a full-on battle mage. I had, I think, a short sword and really really powerful magic.
Mm. Yeah, I mean it's hard to go wrong with sword and board. It just works. It's a trope for a reason.
I like the block as well.
Mm.
I don't like being hit by stuff, so
Yeah, anything that keeps me from taking damage, I'm all for it.
mm.
But yeah, I think now we're just talking in circles. I mean, Oblivion's a good game. I highly recommend it. It's available on damn near any game retailer you can think of. I would be careful if you're picking up the Steam version, because my Steam copy didn't work when I tried to play it. So I have no idea what was up with it. I couldn't get it to actually start.
That's weird. I've never had that problem.
Yeah, I don't know if it's just a problem with my system, if it's a Windows 10 thing, if it's, I have no idea. But it is on Game Pass and probably will be for the rest of time now that Microsoft owns Bethesda. So that's a super easy way to play it if you have an Xbox, and it might be on Game Pass for PC too. But of course, when I was looking with all the other Elder Scrolls games which are under E. This one, for whatever reason, doesn't load under E. It's under O.
Yeah.
So I actually bought a copy, a physical 360 copy, but it was like $20 new for everything. Yes, Oblivion Game of the Year edition is PC Game Pass. So you can play it on console, on PC, or even with the cloud streaming. Although I would not I don't know that I recommend that.
I would say if you can get the PC version running, that's your best bet, just because of the sheer
Just the
amount of
mods.
mods.
Yeah.
And if you do get it on Steam, if you find that it doesn't work on your system, you can always, it's easy enough to refund the game on Steam.
Yeah. I've just owned my copy for way too long to be able to refund it at this point.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, like, I bought Oblivion and Skyrim on Steam years ago. I mean, years ago. And just never got around to them. I got a free copy of the Skyrim Special Edition when it came out. Still didn't play it. I wasn't, like, specifically avoiding these games for any reason. It just never came up. But I'm glad I tried this one, and I will definitely go back and play more of it and probably try to finish it.
There is a reason it's in my top 5 games of all time. It is an incredibly enjoyable game, and in my opinion, the best game in the series.
I think my brother agrees with you. I think he likes Oblivion better than Skyrim. At least Oblivion's the one I remember him playing more. We talked about it once, and he said he likes Oblivion more than Skyrim.
The story in Skyrim puts me off as well. It's like, do you want to side with the racists or do you want to side with the cops? Because you got to side with one of them.
Right.
And it just, everything's snow and it all looks the same, and it's all Skyrim is fine. Skyrim is a decent game.
Yeah.
Just I just don't think it's as good as Oblivion.
Right. I mean, I'm down for a good snow area, but if it's all snow, that could be a problem. Oops, all snow. But yeah, I mean, the main thing that puts me off of Skyrim is the hype. Like, people constantly raving about it. It's like, all right, at a certain point, you get tired of hearing about it.
Mm-hmm.
But that's just me. I think if that's all we've got, we can take another quick break and finish up.
Yeah, okay.
By the gods, there is a psychopath on the loose!
Well, that's all we've got for this episode, this two-man Odyssey. We should have another episode out next month. You know, if we have to do a different arrangement again, you know, that is certainly possible. We're going to try to not have that big of a gap again.
Yeah, it's been. I think May was the last episode that went up.
Yeah, I think so. So it's been a bit. So we're going to try to not do that. But yeah, I think all we really have left is to say goodbye. So goodbye.
Goodbye.
Visit RetroOdysseyPodcast.com to find our latest episodes and all of our social media links.
Then pay with your blood! Ha!